Inger Andersen, the Director General of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, has over 30 years of experience in international development economics, environmental sustainability, and policymaking. Prior to joining the IUCN, Ms. Andersen held various leadership roles at the World Bank and United Nations. Throughout her 15-year career at the World Bank, her managerial roles focused on water, environment, and sustainable development, with special emphasis on Africa and the Middle East. Here to discuss our planets at the crossroads, please help me welcome Ms. Inger Andersen.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and it's a hugely important topic that we are discussing, and I'm obviously privileged to have the opportunity to discuss this with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the very planetary boundaries that Randy was speaking about earlier on, but taking you on a bit of a journey on how these affect the broader planet as we know it. I'm the Director General for IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I'll speak a little bit about that as well. First, some very brief, but since we've had some brilliant discussions before me, I'll make it super brief. Snapshot of where we are, then a little bit about the planet that we are at and the crossroads. The crossroads beyond climate change, the real crossroads that our generation holds. The things that we do or don't do now in our generation is upon us, and I want to highlight some of that. And why this matters, trying to put it into the context of the global setting as we know it, with conflict and with economic decline in certain places, and then a little bit about what we are trying to do from our side as well. So I'm going to whip through this because we've seen it already. Global temperatures are rising, and we just saw the last presentation. Dangerously low sea ice cover, we know that from the previous presentation too. And the planet is already changing. We heard that from President Crimson this morning when he made President Hollande walk for half an hour to the front of the glacier. And we know that our glaciers are retreating, and this is but one other picture. So there is a very real issue here, dire consequences, floodings. We saw that, of course, with Katrina, and then we did have this agreement. As somebody who was in my first COP was COP3, and I remember being in COP3, and I remember that the word adaptation then was what we considered a dirty word. Why did we consider that a dirty word? Because we knew what the answer was. We knew that it was about decarbonizing the economy. And so the fact that in COP21 we celebrated that adaptation forms part and parcel of the agreement, which I very much support, obviously, shows our inability to come to an agreement 21 years sooner. But how marvelous it was that we did come to this agreement, and I salute everyone in this room and many, many others who worked incredibly hard for us to get there. And I very much agree with what President was saying, that had it not been for the leadership of the French president and the entire cabinet, I would say, because I met with most of the cabinet ministers, and in fact, President Hollande invited me to join him for his presidential visit to the Philippines, precisely to speak about how ecosystems play into the climate story. I saw how every minister, irrespective of what they were doing, was being told from top down, this is what we're doing. So the French cabinet stepped up, private sector stayed up, community activists stepped up, indigenous people stepped up, film producers stepped up, and everybody stepped up to make this really happen. But our planet, now we have an agreement, it's on paper, which is wonderful, but our planet is at a crossroads. We've seen, this is a Keeling curve. I put it in because of a point that I'll get back to. It's from the Mauna Loa, which is in Hawaii, and I'll get back to Hawaii in a little bit. But anyway, we've seen how our anthropogenic gases are increasing in our climate and our atmosphere. But last year at the World Economic Forum, what did the world's business leaders highlight as the highest business risk? No, it wasn't migration. No, it wasn't fiscal constraints. No, it wasn't about the value of the euro. Nor was it about resource availability. No, it was about climate change. Yes, it was about issues around water. These were the kind of issues that they saw as being the biggest business risk. So when business is stepping into this and saying, actually, climate and environment matters, that means that we really have an opportunity to make change, which is what so many people in this room are here doing. Water scarcity is a reality, and one that we cannot forget. Our water factories are those forests. Our water factories are those wetlands. Our water factories is that hydrological cycle that we so very much depend on. But we are living in a place where water scarcity is becoming more and more a reality. And that's obviously something to be mindful of. Biodiversity, we saw, and I'll get to the Rookstrom and Professor Catherine Richardson's issue of the planetary boundaries. We are losing biodiversity 1,000 times the natural extinction rate. I'll say that again, 1,000 times the natural extinction rate. We are losing biodiversity. We're all passing through. We have to think of it like that. The dinosaurs came and left, and so on and so forth. But when you are losing plants and animals and species and fungi, the very foundation on our Earth, 1,000 times the natural extinction rate, gentlemen, ladies, we have a problem. And the problem is that it's that very ecosystem that is underpinning our very existence. And in a sense, you could say that climate is solvable more easily, and I don't say that lightly, but we know that there are technologies in place. But it looks like when an owl goes extinct or a frog, it's sort of an isolated incident. But we need to understand it's a very web of life that we are losing. Here we have again the planetary boundaries, and you can see we're sort of pushing against that very planetary boundary space. And we are beyond that space on the biosphere integrity, on the biochemical flows, on freshwater use, i.e. on the very ecosystems that produce the water we drink, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the products that we depend on. So it's a very real story. And why does this matter? Well, it matters obviously to us as a species. You could argue, of course, that we need nature. Nature does not need us. Nature will be fine without us. We might not be so happy, but nature will be weedy for a while, a few millennia, so on, as we have lost so many species, but nature recovers, it always does. But obviously, where would we fit into this? Now, why this matters? Nature, as we heard from the opening this morning, when we were told to root ourselves, to ground ourselves in this good planet, when we sat and we had a meditative session, nature matters because nature is part of our very belief systems. And all religions, and I just chose Laudate Si because when Pope Francis came out with this, it was such a powerful reminder about how what we believe in and nature hangs together. But why does it matter also? Well, there is a link that we cannot ignore between environment and conflict. And we ignore that at our peril. Ecosystem collapse often will lead to societal collapse. It's a reality, but we choose not necessarily to see it or to know it. But there's good work that has been talked about, that 40% of all intrastate conflicts in the last 60 years are connected to natural resources. Mark Twain was talking about whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. There's truth in that. The truth being that we need those very resources to survive, and we will fight for these. Here's a graph that I've used before. It describes Syria. And essentially what you are seeing here is, without getting lost in the detail, a recurrent drought year on year on year that caused massive human displacement, in large part climate-based. So people are moving, and you could, in a sense, already in 2005, as 2 million people in Daraa province in Syria were on the move, you could say, not predict what would happen in 2016, but you could say something bad is going to happen, because they had a dictator in place. There was no access, and people were becoming more and more impoverished. It was obviously fertile grounds for trouble and for radicalization. So nature matters, and the way we manage nature matters, which is why it was so brilliant that in September of last year, the world came together around the Sustainable Development Goals. And you will know these, and for the first time ever, did the world commit not just the poor countries, but also the wealthy countries to try to strive for sustainability. Again, a huge issue and one that we have to hold our governments accountable for. So who are we in IUCN? Well, we were founded in 1948. We are the oldest and the largest environment organization in the world. We have over 1,300 government and non-governmental members, about 1,000 staff and some 45 country offices, and about 15,000 volunteer scientists, crowdsourcing a la 1948. If you want to know about that particular species in that particular spot, we've got the guy and the girl, or the girl. They work in universities, they work in academia, they work in scientific think tanks, they work as Supreme Court judges, because we have a commission too that deals with environmental law, trying to push, and we heard earlier a presentation on law, the imperative of understanding how we have to make nature and that nature consideration very much part and parcel of our paradigm. One of the things that many of you may have heard of is a red list of threatened species. We have so far assessed about 95,000 species. Our goal is to reach 170,000 species, and we are moving right ahead on that. Of the species we have assessed, and this is a global denomination that all countries have adopted, including the US, you will see that 15,000 of these are threatened. We assess the degree to which they are threatened. And here it is that we need to understand that species are like a puzzle. It's an interlinked system. You lose one, the thing can collapse. It's very important for us to understand. But the good news is that conservation works. This is a little bit of a thought experiment. It was published in a scientifically peer-reviewed journal, just looking at ungulates. And we said, okay, take away a thought experiment, take away investments in protection, take away investments in reintroduction, take away natural areas, protected parks. What would have been the red list index, the red line, and what is a red list index, the black line? So essentially what you can see is you do this stuff, nature responds. You can protect, you can reintroduce, nature can be healed. Nature is very forgiving. So last year we had a plethora, and we've all talked about Paris, but I want to broaden this a little bit. We had a magnificent breakthrough on global multilateralism. We had the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which saw an agreement that investing in nature's infrastructure, investing in forests, investing in sand dunes, salt marshes, forest, coastal forest, mangroves, that pays the returns for protection and resilience. Oops. And then we had the Financing for Development Conference in Addis, the SDG Summit, the COP21, and finally, this year, now in Hawaii, we will have the IUCN World Conservation Congress. We are often described as the world's parliament. It's the biggest gathering of environmentalists in the world. It will be in Hawaii. First time that the US hosts such a big conference. Remember, US has never hosted a COP, has never hosted a large gathering of this nature. Delegates will come from across the world. We are hoping that the head of state from the US will be there. It's after all his home state. There will be 500 plus events, and we are very optimistic because this is the time of action. It's a time of action for our planet. We have the framework in place. We know what we need to do. This is about creating as many points of touch as we can on climate change, on oceans and islands, on conservation finance, on the fact that young people, and I look across this room and we are a graying movement, but we have to have the young people inside this movement leading and challenging us for what we have done to this earth. Focusing on illegal wildlife and yes, focusing on the imperative of faith in nature conservation and in sustainability. That is what it is all about. So as we think about this, and during my 15 minutes talk, I want you to do this math. Every second we lose the equivalent of 1 soccer field of forests. Every second. 60 soccer fields in a minute. I've been speaking for 15 minutes. Do the math. It is imperative for us that we step up. It is not a choice of if we should or if we shouldn't. It is a choice of if we want to survive. If a tree would give you free Wi-Fi, we would all be busy planting trees. Too bad that trees only give you the air you breathe and the water you drink. Thank you very much.